It was good. I really enjoyed the film. It was nice. I thought it was a very sad, obviously. It's always going to be. I thought it was really interesting as well, watching it from the German perspective.
Yeah.
Because I feel like all the World War I films at the moment, obviously, are mainly from.
I think I was quite disappointed by like the marketing of the film by Netflix, that it was an English title of the film, because when you actually watched the film it was in German, and it was subtitles, and then they called it All Quiet on the Western Front. I would have actually much preferred it to be a German title.
I think the reason they did that is because the book is called English is called All Quiet on the Western Front, and I don't know if that directly translates to what it's called in German. So obviously it's normally written in German, and I think they made a new title for it.
I just think it was a bit disingenuous, because it's like it is a German film with German actors, and it was
maybe they're trying to balance like an English audience knowing what it is, because if I saw something in German I would know it was a war film, and I'd be like, oh cool, I'll watch that. But until I actually got about 20 minutes into the film, I'd be like, oh, this is All Quiet, because I've read the book, and I'll be like, oh, it's All Quiet on the Western Front, so I'd recognise it. But I think maybe they wanted to like resonate with people who've read the book or know of the...
No, it is a balancing act for Netflix. I just think personally I would have liked a braver, bolder move, especially because it's a remake, and especially because it is Netflix, I think, really needs to position itself as a filmmaker, as an international filmmaker. Like, they did win an Oscar for an international film, and this could perhaps go to the awards, but we'll talk about that in a bit. But I do think it was just for a film. I guess I didn't know the book either, unlike you, but I had heard of it, but I haven't read it.
Yeah, but that's the thing, because you've heard of it, as called All Quiet on the Western Front.
Name recognition.
So I feel like they've just done it so then you can be like, oh, I know that, like I recognise it, I know what it is, to get like a better audience.
Yeah.
At least I think it was good though that they actually did do it in German. Because I watched it in German with English subtitles, but for the first like 3 minutes, they like automatically had it dubbed. And I was like, wait, what? And I was shocked, because I thought they'd done it in English. Until I saw it wasn't matching up and I switched it over. But I was like, why on earth have they done this in English? People who don't know the plot and don't know the book are going to think it's the British soldiers, if you're right, And then, so I switched it over, then I realised they have actually done it.
I think it was really confusing, because I think the uniforms at the beginning, I think they actually spent a bit of time, for several reasons, looking at the like the name tags of people.
They were repairing them.
But I thought the uniforms, maybe for a practical point of view, was to tell the audience whose side this was on. Because I'm so used to kind of seeing like the British colours.
And the uniform in First World War, like obviously the French are more blue, but like the English and the German, like I don't know if I know the
difference, but there is a difference, and I think when you watched it more and more,
when you see them compared, you're like, oh yeah, but I think it was good they had the name tag, and they shoehorned it in very nicely, like by having the showing that it's that somebody else's uniform, taking the name tag off, people are replaceable, blah blah blah. But yeah, from a practical point of view, it's also quite nice, because then you know they're definitely German.
I think it was, probably the book is like this, but it was good to show them like how frail they were and how young they were, like the physical size of the uniforms and like the male body,
Also about that, like obviously at the start of the film, they're all like, yeah, we're gonna go, and they're really excited about it. I was somewhat disappointed with the proportion of time that the film spent on that, because that's like a very, like obviously this is about the film, not about the book, but this is a very large chunk
of the film.
But it should be, no, it's way longer in the book. The first like quarter is all about how young kids are told, you're not going to fight, there won't be actually any violence, you're just going to go to the front, do a bit of drill. I don't know, I feel like they should have spent more time at the start of the film being like, oh, these kids they're literally 14, 16, whatever, pretending to be 18. And like in the book it was a massive thing about how they all forged their parents' signatures, because their parents know better. Their parents know that this is a war, and they were all told by their like commanders or school teachers that like it's a cowardly not to go, it's just and they didn't expect any of it. And I think they did that fairly well. But I think at the start it should have been better, because it just shows that they like were taught it at school, whereas that bit wasn't really included. It was more, they did have like the shock that they didn't know where they were going, but they didn't have the fact that it was like in the society to tell them to go.
I think it's like the first day of them in the trenches, it kind of all leads up to that.
I think that was well done.
No, I totally agree with you about the beginning. I think the beginning maybe sacrificed a bit of individuality of the characters and focus on the characters, and it didn't go that deep into things to kind of be more universal as a story. I think it could have been the propaganda with the Kaiser and things like that. It kind of almost felt like they did that purposely so it would reflect both World War One and Two.
Yeah.
That there's like lots of powerful pressures at home through the state, through propaganda, for these young men to like glorify war and go off there. So I kind of think they just they maybe did too broad a scope and they kind of didn't focus on the actual people.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I think that would be nice. I think just maybe another like 5 minutes at the start, sort of showing how basically they were like pressured into signing up, and they were told like it's basically a school trip. We're gonna go to Paris and see France, and like because I found that like that really resonated with me when I read it, because I remember being 16 and if someone had told me like because they hadn't had like one of the world wars yet. No. They'd obviously had fighting and had war, but nothing like this. Whereas obviously when World War II came, people were a lot more prepared.
Oh yeah, no,
for what they were. So I think the sort of shock of not knowing what was coming was portrayed, but I think I would have liked a bit more like back home in Germany. But
yeah, I think it was. I think one of my favourite scenes was when the tanks came in. And I think that really showed you how this was a new war, especially to like the informed viewer, because I think before that it was a bit kind of like contextless. Yeah, and they kind of just dropped us in the middle of World War One.
It was more about the emotions and the characters rather than about the warfare.
Waiting in a kind of a lazy way for there to be like a clip of how the war began, or like why are they fighting, but nothing happened like that. So it was quite it was confusing in a good way. It was intelligent.
Yeah, I guess they kind of assume a standard, like a basis of
knowledge. Yeah, knowledge. They do.
Which I think is good, because I think sometimes war films do go
too
much into the history, which is great, especially for the uneducated viewer. But I think I quite liked the fact it was more of a sort of artistic and emotional piece.
I just think it just took a while for them to show, like, sometimes to show, until it was through violence, the gravitas of like the political, and how it was a unique war. It just felt like to me the film wasn't actually about World War One. It was just about all war. And they just kept it quite universal with the characters, and because I think watching it, you could have been mistaken for some of the clips that this is men going off to fight in World War II from Germany, and they did that on purpose because they were so closely linked, World War One and Two in Germany, especially like they were the instigators of both at the time, and it was through propaganda. But I wasn't. I think to me it was really interesting. You said another 5 minutes. Perhaps onto the film, because it was already 2.5 hours.
It was a long film,
and I was just thinking,
I think maybe replaced 5 minutes here and there.
I was just thinking though, maybe it would have been better if it was a mini-series. This film in like a 2-parter or a 3-parter film with the same production standards, definitely, because that's what made this great, was the production standards. But,
I quite liked the fact it was a really long sit-down film. I got quite into it. Even though obviously there were scenes that were broken up quite heavily with like artistic shots.
I just think if it was to be faithful to the book, it sounds like it'd be very difficult for it to actually be a film. That's that closely faithful to the book.
Because I guess you don't want to sacrifice like the artistic nature of the film by like cutting out some of the. But there was obviously a few scenes where I was like, this is a little bit slow. Yeah. But I guess that's done deliberately. So.
Do you think the film is relevant for 2022?
Yes and no. I think no, because there's a lot of war films, especially World War One. I think they've been done a lot. I think a lot of people know about it now. They've been, you know, done all the time. But then yes, I guess because this one particularly, as you say, was almost timeless. Like they didn't necessarily specify World War One. Like through the like obvious history and obvious like lead up sections to how the war started, so I think it's more sort of relatable in terms of like it could happen again, obviously not quite like that, but like war and the tensions between people.
I'm glad the film was made for its artistic value, but I wasn't so much, it didn't change my mind particularly about any of the issues about war. I think before I went to the film I was against World War One, and I knew that, especially compared to World War Two, where we were like fighting the Nazis as an enemy, it was really just a European
it was a strange
war, and they call it the World War War, World War One, because of the empires and the colonies that had to do with it. So to me, it didn't really change my mind as like perhaps a bit of an educated viewer about the war. It didn't. I think the purpose of it being in German in the book is obviously to get from the German point of view.
Yeah, because it was written by a German
them.
author.
Yeah, to empathise with them instead of just the British in the war, which is too...
That's been done a lot.
That's been done too much, perhaps, recently as well. But
yeah.
I don't think it changed my mind on anything. I think I left the film...
I don't know whether it was designed to change your mind, though. Like, especially, maybe... I think it was designed to educate about, like, the lack of knowledge between the children that went to war, basically.
Yes.
I think that was the main hitting point about how, like, it kind of educated me, especially, like, reading the book and watching the film, about how people had no idea what they were going into. But I don't know if it was made to change your mind about the war.
Yeah. I think for me, 2.5 hours is too long for that type of plot. And I think in the first hour and a half, I'd seen the horrors.
Enough horrors, yeah.
Enough horrors, enough contrast, enough lies, enough deception.
To understand.
To understand that point. And then the last hour of the film, I think there was a few kind of very clunky bits of the film.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. I think when they showed all the top brass outside of the front line, you know, like having tea, having their cakes, having their fine food. I think to me that is like a stereo. It is not just a stereotype, it's just a cliche.
Yeah.
And we've seen it too many times.
Yeah, like the juxtaposition between, like, it was,
the fine living.
It was slightly clumsy.
I've seen that lots of times, and not just in World War I.
Yeah, it wasn't A, a new take, or B, particularly necessary. Like, we know that, like, you know, people were living it up while people were dying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It was slightly clunky, a bit clumsy.
Yeah.
Like,
I think sometimes some of these films act like they're the first film to ever do this, and maybe perhaps Netflix makes this film for a new generation of people who are like younger than us actually in their teenage years, so it's an educational film, and then they will be like, oh, I never really thought about the top brass, but really when we were taught in history we knew there was like a life of luxury, like a few hundred metres behind, you know, and people weren't in danger, and that is really the front line, is, you know, the trenches.
Yeah, I agree. I just think one thing that was different about it that I enjoyed a lot was the German perspective of it. I thought it, because we see so many things, especially in history, we learn so much about the British side of the history and like all our allies, and how obviously they try not to teach that Germany was bad and things like that. But it was, I think it's good for people to see. And in a way I quite liked the fact, other than the name tags and stuff, it was almost fairly hard to tell at the start whether they were English or German, obviously other than the language and everything, because they're just boys.
Yes.
So I thought that was interesting, and then you obviously started resonating with the characters, and then there was bits where obviously they were killing people, and you're like, no, don't die, like, please don't die, and you're thinking, if it was the other way around, and we were watching it from the other perspective, like the French or the English, we'd be saying that about... So
another visual metaphor I actually did like was the eyes and how they kept constantly covering everyone's faces in mud and acrid stuff. It was quite nasty, some of it, with the blood as well. But they kept doing that, and I think it was just to show that not just nationality but also race and other things, that you actually couldn't tell who was underneath. And that's how they've done that before in films, you know, like on the actual trenches themselves, the dead, they all look the same, but all covered in mud. Mud, that is the poppies, where the poppies come from. But I did actually really like that visual aspect.
I think that was good. I was actually discussing that as well earlier with somebody, how they're all rolling around in mud, they all look the same. It shows that like drawing the comparison between the two sides, and like we're all one and alike, and we're all people, and then also just add to the confusion of who. Sometimes I was watching it, I was like, wait, is that a German or is that a British or French soldier? Then I was like, if I don't know, like, it must be awful actually being there. So I think they did it to show that there's no difference, but also just to add to the confusion that the soldiers must have been feeling in the situation of not even knowing who's who.
I think it just could have had like half an hour less, and then you'd have seen the characters more clearly defined. Even if you didn't add much more content about it, I think it was just the characters, in a way, it's more like Brechtian in that it's about the war, not about the characters. But if it's about the war and not about the characters, why isn't it about the political, social context of the war and not the characters? To me, it's about a war that has no meaning. Maybe perhaps that's the intention of the director, that it has no rhyme or reason, World War I. And that, but I just felt like it was kind of in the middle. and it should have just.
So you wanted more of a focus on like,
either or, like if it is Brechtian and the characters are less important, then it needs to be more social political. If it's
so, I think they obviously didn't want to be socio-political at all, which I think is good for this style of film. But yeah, I kind of know what you mean. Like, you know when Kat, the slightly older man, was talking about how his son died.
Yeah. Actually, I'd like that bit.
Things at home. I feel like they really could have gone into that a bit more, or like maybe with the other characters. Like we technically didn't know where any of them came from, and I
that's what I mean. It's the background, the beginning bit, as you said.
Yeah, I think I liked that. But yeah, I think maybe halfway through the film, they could have then introduced a bit more, because I think I really liked the idea of the fact that we didn't know anything about them because they didn't know anything about each other.
Was it at the end? It was like this pin-up. Kind of, we saw like a little...
The poster?
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the boys taken the poster.
Yeah, and that was one of the final shots of the film. I kind of wanted to see more of that. Do you know when I saw it at the end? I was like, I'd rather have just seen more of the boys...
Emotional links.
Yeah, just like the boys' life, because I think there was that bit in the middle where they tried to make... Do you know when they had that feast?
Yes.
And they tried to introduce some light.
Yeah.
And like some happiness.
They're relying on each other for happiness.
Yeah, and it was a bit of like in a tragedy, you just have to contrast with the darkness.
Yeah.
And I just felt like I would have... And I think maybe that's why a lot of war films do have like a love story going through it, or like a woman or a female character, because otherwise it is... We don't see the full
I just feel like
three-dimensional side of the people. I just don't think the characters are three-dimensional.
Yeah. I do agree, but I feel like with like having a love story, or with having like a really emotional backstory, I feel like it's romanticising it, and it's like making it cinema rather than
That's the thing, it's like I prefer cinema.
Cinema, whereas I like books and films that I feel something for, because not because I'm like, there's a really good storyline, I'm really like, will they get together? For me, it really hit me the fact that it didn't have that. So many of the soldiers and many of the men who were out there fighting, they didn't have meaning. They didn't have like, I'm fighting for someone.
That's
they
why
just went there and got massively disappointed.
I'm not surprised that all you said that, because I think critics will like this film, they won't love it, but I do think loads of the audience will love it. I think it's one of those for fans, like sci-fi is or fantasy is, and that's, for me, that's probably another criticism of the war genre. Is it like fantasy?
Is it too dark?
Is it too? Is it exploiting people that they keep making films about World War One that kind of have a lot of the same beats, you know, like violence? That's to me why when it's a war film, there's an extra obligation on them to make it artistic and not just commercial.
Because you don't just want to sell war.
Sell war films. And I kind of do think personally a lot of the time it is it is just like
they're like commercialising war. I feel like this film did quite a good job at not doing that. I feel like potentially introducing a storyline and introducing romance, or you know, an actual plot, I feel like that would be doing that. So I think I liked this. Normally I do like a film with like plot and a storyline, like something a bit more gripping. But I thought it tasteful that they didn't, because I think
it was tasteful. I think it didn't commercialise it, but I don't think it provoked me either.
Really?
And I don't think it took risks.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that is the source material. But if the source material, in my opinion, doesn't offer something fresh and original, don't keep remaking
it's very old.
Don't keep remaking it until you've got a director with a new vision and new twist.
I think that's really interesting, because I quite like the fact I felt almost empty. In some bits, obviously it was very sad in some parts as well, but in some bits I was like, when they had the long shots of the trees, or they had the paths, or you know, the artistic shots, I almost felt like kind of weird emptiness. I was like, what's happening? What's going on now? But I think they did that deliberately to sort of reflect what the soldiers would have felt. And I feel like at the end I felt like, oh, right, that's that then. He's dead. Like, oh. But I think they did that on purpose. I don't know. I liked it, but I do know what you mean.
I think a valid criticism is that history fans might prefer a bit more of the socio-political, and I think it is a very kind of, I don't know, and then I think if you were a fan of sweeping music and
I was going to comment about the soundtrack. It's very non-English style direction, which I thought was interesting, because obviously it's a German, like in German. There was a lot of genuine just quiet scenes, and then there was also a lot of like drums or like thudding sounds, or like random noises, right? Whereas in like the more classic British war film, we love like an orchestra, a symphony.
I don't think anyone's going to be listening to that soundtrack at home.
Like
other films, like I think like Dunkirk.
Yeah, definitely very emotional.
People listen to the soundtrack in general as a kind of like the Crown's music.
Yeah,
they're great composers, but again, that to me probably does make it more commercial.
Yes.
And so the music I was actually happy with because I felt like they didn't make it to make you entertained.
Yeah, and also quite a lot of the time I think directors, this is a bit of a bold claim, but rely on emotional music to get their message across and to get people feeling sad or scared. And I like the fact they didn't do that. Like the film itself was enough. Like there's nothing wrong with using music to evoke emotion at all, but they didn't do that at all, other than sporadic like beats and stuff, which I guess is meant to be like representing the gunfire.
That's the thing, it all represented real sounds, like bombs,
even the noises, like
noises,
even when it was
chaos.
Musical notes, it was sudden.
It wasn't recognisable that much as music sometimes.
Yeah, no, it was like, is that something? Oh no, it's just like
it's just a background noise. I thought that too.
No, I thought that was very cleverly done. But yeah, what you were saying earlier about how it's not gonna do it for people who like history. One of the problems I have with that because I agree, but is that with a war film, because you were saying sometimes are they overdone? Is it tasteful? I think people get away with saying, oh, we can commercialise on war because it's historical and educational and we can educate people. The only problem I had with this film about what you're saying about whether it's okay to make films about all these films of war and take advantage of all the people that died is it's not particularly educational because it doesn't have the like social, political, historical messages.
I was thinking the same, like if you did watch that, if it was designed for sixth formers or secondary school students,
it doesn't really.
I would think it's like that was who the target audience was. It's young people who haven't watched war films, because I think they purposely put so many cliches in that film that it's like they were like, let's disregard all the other films before us and let's pretend the audience hasn't seen that.
Yeah, I think it was more meant to be like a piece of art potentially than an educational tool, but then
I just don't know who it was for.
And then if it is art, is it okay?
I don't think it is. I don't think it is perhaps for English audiences either.
No.
So I think it is like anywhere around the world, like Asia, South America, the USA.
That's interesting.
I think Africa. I think it is actually more for those people because so much Britain has dominated the conversations about World War One and Two.
Massively.
Like even the Empire was involved with World War One. So I think if you were from a post-colony or Commonwealth, you might actually watch this film.
It's not just going on about Britain again.
Yeah, and you might actually be like, the plot just kept going.
Yeah.
And it never really focused on the dead. They died. And then I felt like they just...
Do you think that was deliberate? Because, again, that's how the war was. There wasn't time to focus on the dead. There wasn't... As in, you know when the first of the friends died, the one with the glasses, he found him, was obviously like, oh my gosh, my friend's dead, and then was asked to carry on.
It was great. That is a brilliant...
But I think that's good, because that's
realistic.
What happened.
Yeah, realistic. But I just...
Whereas you'd have liked a bit more time to be sad.
The cinema, I would like the big score coming up and hear all the graves laid.
But I think that's why
But I think it can be respectful of the dead and their contributions.
Anyway.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that is. Thank you for stopping for a second. I'm going to turn those off now.
Oh my god, it's up.
I think they're on a timer.
That's fine. I think that was good. I don't really have much to talk about now.
Look at that.
It was the Commonwealth discussion's interesting.
Yeah.
The German discussion. What about any more controversy? Do you have any more controversies with the film? I think it's harder to debate than My Policeman, because it is on a sensitive topic.
Yeah, you can't be like, woo, like.
Yeah.
I guess it's just whether you liked it or not, or whether it was.
No, I think the verdict is, like if you're a fan of war films.
But I wouldn't say I was a fan of war films in general. And I quite liked it. I found it quite hard-hitting. Again, as you say, because there wasn't time to like mourn the friends or get upset about people dying. When it ended, I was like, oh my gosh, so many people have died.
Yeah. What I think is very true is there's lots of adaptations of books out there, which when I watch them, I scream because I'm like, why have they just followed the book so closely?
Yeah.
This is a film, you're messing it up. And I think that's maybe the case here, in that it was, as you said, they didn't they did it in quite a straight way.
Yeah, which
like,
maybe works as a text, but not necessarily as a piece of cinema.
There's no kind of spin on it or angle, but that is a brilliant thing in itself. But
yeah, but it depends on.
I think that is a personal taste thing, because I prefer it when a film takes a novel and then makes it into a film. Yeah, instead of just kind of doing that. And I think that's what, as we were saying, we can really imagine this being intended to being in school classrooms. You read the book and you read
and then you can watch
the film. But the film is a bit too long for school.
It's long to do that, yeah, and it's not educational enough. So the target audience is somewhat questioned, I think.
I think it was it's a shame I didn't watch it in a cinema.
Yeah, because it was quite like artistic in terms of like the shots and the like the cinematography of it with the nature.
No, I don't have anything against. Yeah, I'm probably changing my mind now a bit about war films. No, because I don't have anything against people watching it. I just think it's not a film I'd watch again.
No.
It's not a film I'd recommend to anyone.
Really?
And I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. I would say you probably, unless you love World War One, and you actually want to passionately see it without me, I wouldn't recommend it to people.
I wouldn't watch it again.
Because I would say I would have gained everything from that film if I had I didn't watch the trailer. Yeah. If I'd watched the trailer and seen all their best shots, the cinematic shots, I think I would have.
Really?
That's very hard.
It's just taste. It is.
But I feel like
because I thought it was very hard.
I thought this to myself when I read it. I would have loved it if it was about a half-hour film, 40-minute.
That's
short film, and that they just.
I think it could have been shorter, but I think that's too short.
You could have done the whole film in about 50 minutes. I think because they repeated the plot, repeated itself. But I guess that's
the point. Yeah, it just depends whether you like that or not. So I thought this is very cleverly done. They've repeated what's happening. We're thinking, oh, not again. But I was thinking, so are they. Yeah. But then, is that what you want out of a film? Like, it just depends whether you're dedicating 2.5 hours of your time to feel that way.
Yeah.
Potentially more rewarding to read the book because that's potentially more of a hard hitting.
But I don't think many people will be inspired to read the book from this film. Do you?
No. I don't think so, because I think the whole point about the book was it was about the naivety of the children.
It's exposing the German perspective.
Yeah, and it's exposing just war, how people don't know what they're expecting, and how children. It was mainly focusing on the age, and I think that other than at the very start and then at the end when they did that circular link back, they didn't talk about it.
To the Twee stuff, like in my opinion, it's Twee and Michael Morpurgo's Private Peaceful.
Oh yeah.
And those type of films, and and that's kind of why I probably have a prejudice against a lot of war films, because I studied it in school and I didn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
And the book as well.
It's interesting.
Because to me, the story of like a naive Church of England going schoolboy who gets wrapped up in war. To me, that is this is the German version of it.
Yeah, that's
this
very
wasn't
true.
That Twee though. But I think.
But I guess it didn't overplay the whole very well behaved
youthful side of things. There wasn't there wasn't too. It wasn't like they were like, let's spend 10 minutes in a school classroom.
But I feel that's what I was saying at the start. I think that would have been.
Yeah, they should have done they needed to do something.
Tiny bit. Yeah, I don't think they should have overdone it and be like, actually say like, I'm really well behaved, I'm innocent, and you know, as in overdone it. But I think I didn't understand watching the film why. I think a lot of people wouldn't have understood why they signed up to go. Yeah. Because I think it looks like obviously. The film did portray that they weren't expecting. It
dropped you in there. Yeah, it dropped you in the film.
They were like, obviously these kids aren't expecting war, but some of them forged their signature to go, as was shown in the film. But I think maybe like 5 minutes more.
I agree with you.
Just to understand why it was like so good for them to go. They were so happy. They were so excited. But maybe they're expecting people to know that already. I
do have to say, I do think I think the best bit was actually the last hour. I just think they were a bit more loose.
You also saw the relationship with Kat and Paul.
That is why it was better as well. But I think it, as well as like the characters, I think the plot just. But then I hated it when they brought back all the chintzy china and all that stuff from the top brass.
Interesting. How did you feel about Kat's death and the way that he died? Because I thought that was very. Also, they killed the main protagonist.
Yes,
How
but
do you
I was
feel
not
about that?
surprised.
Really?
No, I was not surprised. I was like, dead, dead, dead. It's World War One.
I think a lot of people wanted him to survive.
Yeah.
Or would want him to survive. And I was slightly shocked. I thought they would have done it one of two ways. Either, killed him off and be
I think
like...
the second half was when the acting was the best.
Interesting.
And they actually got a chance to act.
Properly.
Because I think a lot of people, a lot of the time, they were like mannequins, you know, in the uniforms. And they had, like, they showed their bodies quite a lot, like, objectified
Less of,
the
like,
male.
the actual faces.
Yeah, yeah, and then you only saw the eyes. And then there's a few, I think people were very good acting when they died. But apart from that, until someone died, I felt like no one was fully acting. And that all the characters were blurring into the background. And I think they did that on purpose, as I said.
What do you think was the effect of that?
I think it was just to make this not a people story. I don't think they wanted it to be human interest, and they wanted to have an ensemble cast and all that.
Yeah.
That's why he died. Yeah, because I think if it was just a protagonist story, his death would have, in like Private Peaceful, there's a death, I don't want to spoil it. But like, you know, if there's a significant death, they build it all the way through the film.
That's true, yeah.
And
you
then they
connect
take
with the main character a
ages
bit more as well.
after the death as well. And it's such a
and
big
the deaths
deal.
will be a bit longer.
But here, you liked it that the deaths weren't a big deal, and they just carried on realistically.
Yeah, as in, to be engaged with a film and cry when I'm watching it, I think I would need like the big build-up, the emotional connection, and I didn't have that. But I think I found it quite profound that I didn't have that. Because I would say I was quite an emotional film watcher. When someone dies, I normally cry, I normally get upset, and I didn't. I'm thinking, I'm watching a World War One film. So, like, boys, like 16-year-olds probably are dying on this film. Why am I not? And then I was like, that's what it's done.
It was a bit desensitized.
But it's taken away the emotionality of it. But and that's why they did it, because that's what war does.
I think you have.
I think it's so.
I think it is, as you said, it is realism. They just promoted realism, and there's lots of positives to realism.
Yeah, but
there are a few negatives to realism too. But I think you're really right. There's lots of virtues in doing it realistic.
Yeah,
and it does avoid it being commercialised, because in real life, one person dying didn't stop the war.
No, and I think
no one stopped because of the death.
I think that's where I liked it, because I think I agree with you for most films. Normally, I like a gripping plot. I want the protagonist to live. I'm normally really, committed to the plot. But I think this was good, because I think had they done that, war doesn't end from one person dying.
I think if I had to be very, very honest here, I think because there is a language barrier watching the film, I don't know if acting. I think sometimes we're a bit harsh on foreign actors.
Yeah,
because I feel like because of the language, because we don't understand the way they speak. A lot of their acting through their vocal delivery was probably
missed.
Missed on me.
And we spent quite a lot of time reading subtitles.
I think if we were actually German, we'd probably been like, oh, the acting was exquisite.
Yeah.
But for me, I was relying so much on facial expressions that when people were like the mannequins and people were like we
almost need them to overact it.
It is because I think they are boys, so you just see them as like toy soldiers, you know, on the field. That's how I always saw them. And then when they died, it was horrific, and that's when I saw the acting. But the German language, but I think by the end of it, I stopped seeing them as German by the end of it.
Yeah. I don't think that's really.
Especially with Kat's death, I thought he was like.
Oh, I was so upset. Yeah.
I thought he was almost like a character that appeals in like any culture.
Yeah. Like that fatherly figure.
Yeah.
But also a friend.
It made me think of people I know who are British. You know.
when they arrived in the trenches and they were being shouted at by the the people in charge. Kat was the only one who was like, "Oh, have some of my bread and you need to put your hat on." I thought
food was a metaphor, but a clunky metaphor.
Okay.
So as I said, like the elites had their food.
Yeah.
And then they had that feast.
Yeah.
And they had other food. Yeah. So I think it was interesting because it was a big part of the war was food production.
Yeah.
And like the lice and the stale crackers, and you see a lot of that from the British, and I think that's when it gets a bit like. This film is like going around they're not theme parks, but those, those old-fashioned history museums, and you visit everything. Some films get a bit too into that when they get into props and stuff like that. The gas masks.
What did you think the food was a metaphor for?
I think it was a very cliched one, just us and them, elite versus the normal person.
Oh, I see. So
I do think it was bonding. I think the food was
like the class divide.
Yeah, but also I do think, to be fair, the food was quite good when it was saying that they're still human people. Yeah, they still have their basic needs.
Yeah,
and I think that definitely showed that you could imagine them with the chicken and things like that. I could imagine the British doing that.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyone doing it's like that's a universal experience. So I think the food. I think I did write this down. The food was universal.
Yeah.
But I just thought when the commander
I
was just so angry with that scene. I was so angry with that scene because to me it's just like I've seen it loads of times.
Which scene?
The croissant
scene, yeah.
Yeah, and there was other scenes very small. Like those scenes were very small, but they kept doing it in the second half. I was like, stop doing it.
I didn't hate the croissant scene though, because when he says, "Oh, are these croissants from today?" and the chef was like, "No."
Yeah.
And then it like shot to a clip of them having like 8-day-old bread and they're in the trenches.
Yeah, to me that's too
it was clumsy.
Heavy-handed.
Yeah. Yeah, I do agree, but I thought it was interesting that they decided to put that in, but because the whole film's quite subtle. Yeah. And then I thought, that was potentially a bit.
That's
of
why it was a bit
comparison.
weird when it was super subtle, and then there was this peaks of.
Yeah, they obviously made that very, very clunky, but that's interesting. But yeah, when Cat died, I was very upset. Obviously, but he was trying to steal food, and that was the thing that upset me. I think because.
Yeah, but
everyone should eat.
But I think if some of the other characters were fully realised more, you would have been more upset when they died early.
Yeah,
because when some people died early in the film, I didn't really care and I felt bad. I didn't
that's
really
the point.
care.
That's
you say that's the point, but to me, I think we should have cared a bit more.
No, I agree. Yeah, like when I can't remember his name, but one of the friends who died when he got lit on fire.
Yeah.
They didn't show his face.
Oh, the fire scene, I thought that was
I didn't think that was done well enough.
I didn't think that was
so like I do like the fact that all the deaths were quick and sudden, and you didn't really have time to process them because nor did the soldiers. But at the same time, I think for a little bit of like bringing a bit of emotion in when that guy was burning.
I thought it was a bit dehumanising the way they directed it. I just felt like that was a bit off compared to the rest of the film.
Yeah, I feel like they could have done a clip where it was him actually dying.
To me, I thought, is this an appeal to people who like violence in films?
Yeah.
Because to me, it didn't show the humanity.
Interesting. So I think they didn't show the humanity to be more humanising, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. But then it also, a different take is that it could have just been, appealing to people who like violence and don't care about the people.
To me, that was just a shot. I don't think they fought through it enough. I just felt like it was a bit thoughtless. Yeah,
there's two takes on it. Whether they did that almost deliberately to be like, people just die, be sad about it, or whether just to be like, appeal to those who don't necessarily need that. Yeah, it's an interesting one. But I thought that death particularly needed more time. I think they did Cat's death well, as in that lasted time.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. It gives the humans a bit of respect.
Bit of something. You need something.
That's why I think maybe it is.
To make a film, like to make it watchable, you do need some. Even if you think it's tacky or commercialising or war, you need a bit of an emotional connection, as people aren't going to watch it.
Yeah.